Time for sound design. Today another deconstruction of a track I made based around a sample from a Dutch-Swedish singer-songwriter from the 60s and 70s. His name is Cornelis Vreeswijk and he has a song called En Visa om het Rosenblad, if I pronounce that correctly. And the song starts with a piano melody, and that I thought is a perfect sample that I can use to build a sort of lo-fi house kind of track around. The track is 122 BPM. The original is written in G sharp, so mine is also written in G sharp, and the track is mainly based around this sample. I added like a bass line and drums and some textures, but it's a very basic beat. I haven't fully developed the arrangements, but I have a few different parts that I want to show you and explain how I made it. So let's go to Ableton and let's get started. So this is the Ableton session, which contains the sample, a bass line, and for the rest it's mainly percussion and some textures. But I want to first start and focus on the actual sample. So this is the original sample from the track. And I took the first part, so until here, so I'll play that again. So it's really 6 notes, and then I go to track 2 where I put the sample. And the first thing I do, when you hear this sample, there's some kind of light drums going on in the background. So I used a utility to only use the left channel of the sample, which sounds like this. And I also did a low cut EQ of 150 Hertz. I also lowered the quality to 12-bit. Just to give it a bit more of that lo-fi feel. Then I went into the sample. I put the warping mode on complex to basically have not too many artifacts because it's time stretched a bit. And I did some correction with these yellow markers here to have it exactly on the beat. Since the sample is too short to have a 2-bar loop, I repeated at the end of the 2-bar loop the last note. So I copied this part and I repeated twice to have a perfect 2-bar loop. So this is basically the basic way that I use this sample. I wanted to kind of preserve the melody and the notes that are being played of this sample. So if you would hear the original and you would hear my sampled version, you could actually recognize the sample. But this is only 2 bars and I want to create a 4-bar loop. So what I did for the next 4 bars, it starts the same. So the beginning of bar 3 is the same 3 notes. But then for the 4th bar, I wanted to create a bit of variation. Otherwise it becomes too monotone. So what I did is here in light purple, I reversed the sample and I took a little bit of the start of the sample, the starting note, so this note, and I reversed it and then repeated it 4 times. So then it sounds like this. And by repeating it 4 times, you get this kind of repetition that you often have in like French house music or house music in general, or in hip hop as well. And you still hear that kind of percussion, even though I only use the left channel of the sample. But that adds to the character, and because it is sampled, you always have a little bit of spill of other instruments in it. The next thing I did, before we get to the bass line, is actually add a kick drum to this. So just to get a feel how it sounds with a 4 to the floor kick. The kick I used is from the Formaggio 2 kit. It's a standard kit from Ableton. So it's a very mellow kick. It has a big sign. Just mono to kick, and yeah, that's it basically. So before we get into the rest of the drums, I want to talk about the bass line. So the original track is written in G sharp. I used my favorite synth bass again, the operator subsine, and I just played this very basic pattern. Let me play it without any other instruments first. So it's very basic, but I think it sort of accentuates the sample, or it helps support the sample in the low end. And with the kick. And then from here on, I started adding percussion. So the first thing is an offbeat hi-hat. And then for the main part, a rim shot. Some claps. There are two claps and they're a bit early. One is a bit early, one is a bit late. Another snare, which is basically sort of white noise burst. On the second snare there's an additional noise snare. And then here a snare roll as well towards the end. And then use the Abbey Road kit from In Contact for some crashes and rides. Sort of the piano sample together with the crashes and ride really gives this kind of jazzy feeling. Even though this is not a jazz record, it's a singer-songwriter, like a folk song. But it kind of gives you that feeling, so very sort of mellow and easygoing. And then for the start, I used another noise sample from my own sample pack that I made. I reversed it and put a tremolo on it. So that's how you create the intro. It almost feels like a shaker, actually. So these are the main layers in this track, or at least the start of this track. I have to further develop the arrangement. But let's talk about the different parts and how I made the transitions. So the start of the track is this noise sample. And then it gets into the actual piano sample. And I didn't start with the beginning of the sample. I took this part, which is the second and third note, and I repeated it several times. And then I cut it smaller, so you get more of that kind of stuttery effect. Plus I use an auto filter to even filter more out of the low end before dropping into the actual drums and bass. Then I brought in the hi-hat, and from here on I bring in all the drums. Then I wanted to create a second part, like a B part, where there's less of the sample. And what I did is I just used the first note and also this part, which is the second part of the first note. And I added the delay. So as you can see, there's automation to enable the delay, and it sounds like this. So you basically strip down the sound. So you still hear the sample, but not continuously, so there's a bit more air. And this is maybe also the part where I can bring in another instrument, like a synthesizer, to fill up that space, but I haven't gotten to that part yet. So yeah, let me play you what I have then so far in its entirety, and I show you how it looks in Ableton as well at the same time. and so on. So that was it for this video. I just want to show you quickly how I use a sample from an old singer-songwriter in a kind of funky jazzy way to create this lo-fi house track. I want to build out the arrangement, add some synthesizers, create more variation in the track by bringing in more layers, even more textural layers, and also more effects or effect automation. But this is a good start for a track with some solid low end, a solid sample, and interesting drums. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know how you use samples from old records, if you use them. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and see you in the next one.